Hello friends, welcome to the 7th edition of Navina Jafa webinar series titled Ayodhya, Awadh and Beyond, The Unknown Stories. It is a frame that looks at unusual narratives of one of the greatest politically and culturally and geographically contested areas of the Indian subcontinent, where recently the whole idiom of one little sleepy town called Ayodhya has been all in the news. How do we look at just this one window when the story of the location and the ecology of Ayodhya is far greater? Welcome to this e-heritage tour with me. Yes, we are in the midst of the monsoon season, the season of Sawan, the first month of the Hindu calendars of monsoon, is one which recalls the rural pulse of Uttar Pradesh. You go miles and miles in the region of Awadh and you come across young girls swinging on the mango trees. The rains have come and has brought prosperity. The branches mold to the body and swing. The green glass bangles tinkle on my henna painted. The green veil slips as I swing. Yes, the Sawan has come. Let us hear the same song in the Bollywood movie Junoon. This is the region of linguistics. The whole area, which is now called Uttar Pradesh, has on the east Purvanchal. This huge middle light yellow is what we are talking about. Awadh, Awadhi as a dialect of Hindi, and Braj. And on the south side, you have Bundel Khandi. So we are talking that this state, especially the region of Awadh, has a context of geopolitics with, yes, Nepal. In political terms, in the modern Uttar Pradesh terrain, we are talking about Farrukhabad, Kanpur, Bijnor, Bahraich, Unnao, Sitapur, Lakhimpur Kheri, and Lucknow, and you have, Fatehpur, and you have Sultanpur, Allahabad, and so many more. So Awadh is not only and not only Lucknow or Ayodhya. As I said, the geopolitics is sublime there, and it's a shared biodiversity with Nepal. This region is called Tarai. It is defined by a high water table, and it is definitely one with a lot of grasslands and a lot of biodiversity hotspots. In fact, starting from the lower Himalayas in Uttaranchal, right to the lower regions towards Bihar and Bengal, you have a number of wildlife sanctuaries that go hand in hand with the idea of biodiversity hotspots and wildlife and various other aspects of cultural ecology. When I'm talking about, for instance, in Lakhimpur Kheri, you have the famous Dudua National Park, which has these tall grass, and in this tall grass, the most important grass is the kush grass, for instance, and other kind of grasses. And you have, as I said, and these areas, very interestingly, are not heavily populated in the grasslands itself. It's still not very heavily populated. It was only in 1947 that there was a lot of migration of refugees, especially the Sikhs who came to the Tarai region and habited here. But still, these are very open, a lot of open and forested backgrounds and huge infestation of malaria. So this is another reason why the British and post-independent era has not seen a very large number of urbanization going on here. One of the fascinating aspects of Awadh are its indigenous communities, very less talked about, called the Rajdharus. They stay in Nepal and in many districts of Awadh. They are very colorful people, they are matriarchal communities, they have their own systems of religion, and in many ways they've aligned themselves with a higher Brahminical order that you have them celebrating a lot of festivals that go with the mainstream, but they have their homes which are organically and eco-friendly, and I'm sure there's an opportunity here for another kind of tourism to develop. This, my dear, is not at all fishing nets. These are mosquito nets. As I said, this is a huge area filled with mosquitoes. They make all kinds of utensils and tools and household interiors with grass. It's called the Sikhi work, and they're very colorful. And it also is like from our area right up to Bihar and beyond. And as I told you, they have fascinating, colorful dresses. The Raj Tharu communities, and let us see them perform. And then let's not forget, Awadh is part of the Doab, that is two rivers, Ganga Jamuna. It is one of the richest alluvial plains of the world, which is why it is even today contested. Has one of the highest rate of fertility, is called the granary of India. And because of the constant urbanization and human habitation, there is this huge number of cultural indexes that go, the bounty, the conflict, and the lament that go with the stories side by side of human settlements and the rivers. Not only of Ganga and Yamuna, Gomati, Ghagra, Saryu, Sai, and many, many other rivers. So these are, let us look at the first canvas, and that of Buddhism, 6th century BC. Buddha died in Awadh. He died in a place, gave up this cycle of life to enter a period of existence that goes without a mortal assumption of human suffering. He's called the Parinirvan. He passed away in Kushinagar. There lies the very large, this dying Buddha, and everything he is written here, everything decays. Strive for your goal with diligence. Buddha preached in the Dudhwa National Park of Tarai. You also have the kush grass that I spoke about. The kush grass is also a sacred grass that is very, very important to rituals, and in fact very important to the idea of meditation, because it helps you to focus. So he always, apparently Buddha, it's written and it's recorded that he sat on the kush grass. The second Buddhist sector you have is Samkasya, which is where a miracle was performed, that Buddha went to heaven, but came down the gold and silver um, and diamond ladders in Sankasya, which is where the imperial ruler Ashoka the Great, who converted into Buddhism, had his message of Buddhism and non-violence and coexistence established as pillars and edicts, and a pillar was found in Sankasya. So this is a representation of the miracle, but not from this area, but from another World Heritage Site of the Buddhist Stupa Sanchi from the Northern Gate. But it shows here the ladder that shows the depiction and illustration of the mirror. From Sankasya, Buddha walked to this place called Shravasti, where he lived, and in a beautiful mango grove of Shravasti, given to him by a merchant, Jetwan, and he preached there. So Shravasti is yet another place for Buddhism tourism, and this is the Jetwan which was created, which still remains there. So the essence of Buddha goes and blends with the idea of Awadh. From from the Buddhist sector, we come yet to another sector, and this is Jaunpur. Jaunpur is very close, is part of a very unique part. It has a history of a brief rule of Afghan, Turkish, and Persian kings who had the blood of Persian, Turkish, and Afghan blood, and they were called the Sharkis of Jaunpur. Unique architecture, but they were quite often in conflict with the rulers of Delhi called the Lodhis, and many of their documented archival material has disappeared. They, however, have left behind a legacy of fantastic Indo-European, Byzantine, Saracen architecture, and captured in these mosques and various other buildings of this area, and a particular kind of music, classical Indian music called the Jaunpur Gharana, as well as a whole league of poetry. So here is the Jami Masjid, and uh, and also this is the perforated moss, the Jharjari moss, Jharjari like a seed, and you can see how beautiful this is. And from the Jharjari moss, we come to the world of poetry, where in Awadhi you had this Sufi poem of compassion, of love, of piety, of enjoyment, of shringar, of love written, and then inspiring people to paint. 10 folios of Mullah Daud's Laura Chanda, which is there in the Chandigarh Museum, but is something worth visiting and seeing how this beautiful poem in Awadhi is being translated and lives as an immortal piece of great literature. Ah, but Jaipur is also known for a very specific kind of a soil, which is not biotechnologically tampered, or GI is there, genetic engineering. You have radishes called Nevari Muli radish, which actually grows as big as 6 feet and 4 feet, even calabash, because the soil there is very specific. And I think the UP government is missing out a big point when they are not going for a GI of or geographical indication heritage of agriculture. In fact, agriculture to us is something which this region can come up with. When we come to the history of Mughals, I want to, each of these windows demands a separate book, a separate research, but therefore I'm bringing the idea of our reinstating the idea of peaceful coexistence. So here we have a person who was the finance minister of the great Mughal emperor Akbar, and he was from a community of accountants called the Kayas. The Kayas are very important in terms of professionalism, in terms of doctors, lawyers, bureaucrats, and they're very literate people, and like the Kashmiri Brahmins. And these two communities have contributed in different areas of North India and beyond a lot in terms of intellectual progressive thinking. So Raja Todarmal of Akbar's finance minister was a great statistician, and his statistics of, for instance, of measuring land is still used in the 21st century. He died in Lahore, but before he left Allahabad, where he lived, he instituted on the name of Akbar the coins of Ram and Sita in gold coins. And he lived in Allahabad, and he supervised architectural teams to build different forts. So when we say it's a Mughal fort, we are wrong, because there are very prominent Hindu, so-called non-Islamic people who are engaged in bringing out the idiom of power through architecture. So this is Raja Todarmal's courtyard grand house in Allahabad, and there's a very, very beautiful Ganesh temple here, and it's in a dilapidated condition now, and it is in a locality along the Ganges, and it is called Daraganj, because one of the Mughal princes, Dara Shikoh, actually took refuge in this famous house. From Raja Todarmal's Haveli, we come into the great city of Ayodhya. It is a city along a river called Saryu, and it has a very contested idiom where the Ramayana in the language of Awadh becomes the most popular version of the epic written in Sanskrit. There are over 44 versions of the Ramayana in the Indian subcontinent and many more beyond it. But the one in Awadh is the most popular amongst every Ramayana, and it's called Ramacharitra and it has become obviously a great political tool as well over a period of centuries. The poet who lived in the 16th century, and along with him, many other poets who wrote about coexistence, who wrote in local dialects, in local vernacular. It was the heydays of celebrating vernacular languages and bringing the idiom of coexistence, compassion, and peace, and good moral order through translations and through innovations in languages and poetry. So Goswami Tulsidas's Ram is compassionate, and with him comes Sita, and they go together. And therefore, in Ayodhya, you don't say Jai Shri Ram, you actually say Jai Siya Ram, because with Ram, whose entire story is linked with the idiom of his wife, Sita. Sita is the bride, Sita is the idiom of women empowerment. Sita as the symbol for in the folk songs of women who are pregnant, who are disempowered, who are disappointed. Here is Sita in a folk song who doesn't have assistance in her last days of labor, and goes to in a folk song, goes to the forest goddess and asks her to assist in her labor. And then sends the barber, the haircut dresser, to her father-in-law in the folk song and tells the barber to inform her father-in-law, her mother-in-law, her brother-in-laws, her sister-in-laws, but not Lord Ram, because she feels her disappointment with her husband with this folk song. Let us hear some of the lines. From the idea of heritage of Sita in Ayodhya, normally when we are reading about Sita, we refer to Sita's kitchen and that's it. But Sita has her own idiom for the people of Awadh. Sita represents the gentle wife, the ideal woman, the symbol of empowerment. And she comes through this architecture called Kanaka Bhavan, which apparently came. It's a place where young brides come to get blessings for a happy marital life. It's also a place where young women come to ask for a good husband. This building was built by another clan who came from the heritage town of Orcha. And in the Kanaka Bhavan, and there's a whole story that talks about this queen of Orcha, how she took a statue of Ram for defeating her husband, who was a worshipper of Krishna, and then becomes a devotee and builds the temple of Kanaka Bhavan. Kanaka Bhavan, which means the Golden Temple, is also the place where it is believed that one of the rituals we have in Awadh is, I say we because my mother comes from Awadh, that when the veil comes and the young bride comes, everybody is curious to know what she looks like. And so one by one, the women come and looks at the face. It's called mudikai, to look at the face, and gives the bride a gift. And this particular building apparently was given to Sita by her mother-in-law. So the tale goes. Within the ecology of cultural economics and cultural performances and rituals are these group of people who actually perform the stories of Ram, and they are from a caste called Kathak, which and one of the family members is lucky enough to be employed in the courts of the Persian Maharajas called Nawabs in Lucknow in later years, and the rest of the family who serve these temples, do agriculture, and during special festivals they perform the stories about Ram and Sita. So this is the Kathavachan happening in the temple of Sita in Ayodhya. Ayodhya is very much part of the Twin City. The other city next to Ayodhya is Faizabad, and Faizabad is where the Persian Maharajas or Nawabs started their rule of Awadh and set up their little camps. Their fort was built by a French person. But in the story of Faizabad, what is important is the story of the powerful queens. Bahu Begum and her mother-in-law. And this is a story of the Zanana or the harem and the lush and the luxury and the empowerment of the women. So this is Bahu Begum, the young bride. Her son goes to establish a new city of rule in Lucknow, which is the capital of Uttar Pradesh now. But parallelly, her mother-in-law and she rule from Faizabad, and they are later tortured by the British Governor General Warren Hastings. And such was the unfair battle that a question was raised in the British Parliament. They build a lot, they are very cultured, they give a lot of impetus to education and so on and so forth. So these are one of the earliest empowered women from as Persians to be a part of the Awadh narrative. This is the mausoleum of Bahu Begum in Faizabad. And the story of the great Persian queens in Awadh ends with this famous person by the name of Hazrat Begum Hazrat Meher, whose journey is intriguing, starts a life as a courtesan and ends as a warrior queen to save give a competition to the British East India Company during the First War of Independence, which we call the First War of Independence, and the Brits call it the Mutiny in 1857. And so she fought so bravely that many of the British soldiers, in fact, said she was a better fighter than her husband. And the commemorative stamp that comes out, interestingly, looks at her as a dancing girl. The Persian Maharajas of Nawab were obviously Shias and not Sunnis. So the king, so this is another very important identity and very specific to Awadh, the identity of the Shia Muslims. And within this frame, you have these wonderful monuments, which are called Imam Bara, or congregational spaces for the month of Muharram, where there's a mourning to mourn the death of the tragedy of the Battle of Karbala, where the grandsons of the Prophet Hussein and Hassan, they go from Medina to Karbala, and a lot of men, women, and children are killed and suffer. And during the month of Muharram, for 40 days in the city and around Awadh, people observe Muharram and they gather, they have different other fascinating rituals, and they sing a particular kind of a poem called Soz and Marsiyas. So this is how inside the Imam Bara, which is the congregational space, that the majlises would take place in the 19th and late 18th and the 19th century, and even today. But there are these Imam Baras exclusively meant for women. And this is one in the middle of the city, and it's called Jannat Ki Khirki, which is the window of paradise. And this also depicts the empowerment of how women come to own public spaces, even in during this very conservative time of purity and pollution to be observed during Muharram. The women, such as the Tawaifs or the courtesans, actually led the processions of Muharram in the yesteryears. From the world of the Persian queens and the courtesans, we come to folk theatre called Nautanki. And the Nautanki, in fact, was something which was male dominated. It was a traveling theatre, operatic theatre. It still is. It's satirical, uh, inclusive of music, dance, and satirical narratives and theatre. And in the 1930s came this absolutely historical woman called Gulab Bai. Let's hear her voice as she talks about her jaunt near the river. Oh, sorry, sorry. And this is how Nautanki looks like today. Let's take a slice. In this Nautanki, there's a satire on rising prices and slapstick humor. From here, of the world of the folk theatre of Nautanki, we come to the central metaphor defining Awadh. The idea of the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, which actually Ganga is a river which is lighter in color, Jamuna, Ganga, and Jamuna is a river which is identified as the dark river. So, what is very interesting to see, this idiom which we often use as Ganga Jamuna is actually a metaphor of contrasting energies, contrasting cultures, contrasting idioms that coexist together. And that is why Awadh, which was a part of the alluvial narrative of rich plains, a lot of migrations taking place and blending together, negotiating and existing, coexisting together. Has always remained the intrinsic idea of Awadh. So here we have the idea of Awadh, especially in the celebration of the spring festival, Holi, where everybody, it's metaphoric that everybody gets colored, so you can't make out the difference. And that is the idea of the Ganga Jamuna culture of Tehzeeb. From very much so, as soon as the Persians come, you start having a very interesting gradual inlay thread coming of Europeans. For example, look at the one of the Imambadas. It's called the Chota Imambada of Lucknow, and just look at the similarity of the gateway, the Baroque facade of the Church of Gesù in Italy on the right, and just see the door of Chota Imambada on the left. So you have many Europeans, French, Italians, and so on and so forth coming into the Lucknow, just as in Agra, which is Taj Mahal is really an idiom of cross-cultural idioms of what is stereotyped as Silk Road. Similarly, Lucknow becomes a kind of a bridge of bringing all kinds of idioms in architecture, in behavior, in literature, in so on and so forth. Like the Wedgwood of La Martinière's school in Lucknow, the British Wedgwood, which comes into being, and people can actually do this, and the evidence of Freemason geometric idioms that come into being. Neoclassical architecture, and the Freemason comes, for instance, in this geometry of architecture and interiors called oculi, where you can see beyond. So this motif, which is again and again repeated in different parts of our buildings. I will, among the Anglo-Indians, the Muslims, you have the Kais and Kashmiris as the Umras or the elite, the intellectual, the educated classes of Awadh. I would like to just mention two of them here in this brief lecture webinar, which is the story of Kashmiris and Kais in terms of cuisine. So in terms of cuisine, you have, for instance, a huge paraphernalia. We often talk about the cuisine of Lucknow with regard to the Nawabi cuisine of dum pukht and of kebabs, but there is the Kais cuisine. For instance, this is nimona, which is made of green peas, roasted, but there's an entire paraphernalia of vegetable that is made with a very specific combination of spices, which is oriented in the yellow mustard seed, cooked in a special manner. It's called sarson ka masala. And you have a range of heritage of sweets. Every district you go to, every little town you go to, you find that there is a huge paraphernalia of sweets. For instance, makhan malai, it's like the froth of a cappuccino, but you have sprinkles of dried fruit, powder, and crystal sugars. And it is sold everywhere in Lucknow and whereabouts. This is called Malai Kapan. It seems that the Nawabs of the Persian Maharajas were not allowed to eat pan at one point in time. That's the betel leaf. And so the sweet maker created this very delicate layer of creamy betel nuts in the form of this sweet filled with crystal powder, and it melts in your mouth. Malai Kapan and Malaiki Gilori. And this is not noodles, but these are grated calabash sweet called Kapoor Kand from Allahabad. Again, the idea of Awadh is incense, saffron, cardamoms, and so many kinds of flavors. That's the idea of Awadh. Apart from that, the European, the Iranian impact on architecture can be seen in the British had commissioned 5 major universities: Calcutta, Madras, Bombay, and amongst the 5 universities was the University of Allahabad, 1881. What was most dominant as a feature was allowing women to come in for higher educational studies. This is the university which has given prime ministers to India, Prime Minister Pandit Nehru, B.P. Singh, Chandrasekhar, and many, many other prime ministers, cabinet ministers, governors, bureaucrats, doctors, and most importantly, poets. Even the father of Amitabh Bachchan, the superstar of Bollywood, was teaching as an English literature professor in Allahabad University. Firaq Gorakhpuri Mahadevi Verma, and many, many more giants of Hindi, Urdu, and English literature emerged from the Allahabad University. Um, Apart from that, about from the Lucknow University and the Kanpur University, you have the Isabella Thoburn College, and I must tell you that she is an American woman who comes in the 1900s and establishes the IT College for Women Education. And what a narrative this is, that women who come to study become scientists, and Leelavati Singh became the first professor in the Isabel Thornburn 1900 Lucknow College. Another alma mater is Atiya Hussain, a famous writer of culture, of Abdi culture, migrant culture, literature that came out from areas of England and even Trinidad and Tobago. But Atiya Hussain becomes the inspiration for post-colonial literature of Anita Desai and many others. You also have parallelly great progressive schools of Islamic studies, both Shia and Sunni in the madrasas. Like this is one of the oldest madrasas of Jamia Nizamia of 1890. And of course, the women assert their feminism through their clothes and their fashion. For instance, the idea of sleeveless blouses and haircuts. There's this famous song, I am an Indian, but the fashion is English. I eat in restaurants, not in home kitchens. I eat with forks and not in rolled pieces of rotis. I drive in cars and not horse carriages. Indeed, I go driving with my driver. I go to club with my dog, my puppy, and I do ballroom dancing with my husband. So that's the assertion. मैं हूं तो हिंदुस्तानी पर ये फैशन अंग्रेजी. And then we come to the world of literary heritage of, yes, prints. And one of the early printing presses was by this man called Naval Kishore. He had established in tandem with his affiliation with the British, the press of Naval Kishore, which came out with this whole plethora of manuscripts, including that of publishing Ghalib. Urdu, Hindi, Awadhi, and so on and so forth. For instance, this book which was discovered recently, 1866, The Marvels of Creatures of Strange Things Existing, is a book on astronomy, translated and reiterated by Naval Kishore. So very fascinating. It's a book on astronomy, and it's by an Iranian, and it's printed. And I mean, just the wonder of what Lucknow and Awadh is about is the different things which I am bringing and popping in. This is Saraswati Press, which brought out the first copy of Gitanjali, the Nobel Prize winning novel, poetry book of Rabindranath Tagore. This is where it was printed. And in 1884, and it brought out the first magazine in Awadhi and Hindi. And yes, how can wit and humor not be and satire not be a part of Awadh? Of course, that's what Awadh is about. And this is in parallel to the London Punch, the Awadh Punch. And this particular, there's a lot of commentary on the political happenings, and it is the archetype of political cartooning in India, brought out as a weekly under a formidable Shahjad Hussain, who's a formidable editor. And this, for instance, is the narrative of the Russians interfering with the British policy in Tibet. Yes, Tibet and China and geopolitics today. Well, you have a fascinating record in cartoon from the late 19th century, and Awadh Punch ended in 1936. As we end this webinar, let's not forget that Awadh is about coexistence. Awadh is about parallel lives. of high cultures, low cultures, of black and white, of low and high. This is where Ram came, believed to have come, and given up by submerging himself in the river Yaman, Saryu. Saryu is the river of lament. And finding hope, finding the idea of our coexistence. Let us hear one of the source or the elegies of Hussein by Askari Naqvi, who talks about partition. Can we assert that the intrinsic idea of Awadh is coexistence? Let us hear Askari. Vatan se juda, the idea of Awadh, how can you separate me from my home idea? As a part Awadhi, I just pray that the intrinsic idea of Awadh, of coexistence, re-emerges in the alluvial plain, in the celebration of fertility, prosperity, and diversity. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge Mr. Ramesh Pandey from the Indian Forest Service, who was kind enough to give me inputs on Tarai. He was the former field director of the Dudhwa National Park. My classmate, my contemporary from college and from the All India Radio, Mr. Sanjay Mattu, Dr. Arsha Sethi, an expert on cultural management, dance scholar, and activist who was kind enough to share a photograph of Kathavachan with me. Srimati Uma Verma, who was kind enough to share her recipes and the world of Kaya's cuisines with me. Dr. Indurama Srivastava, a musicologist who's worked on gender and folk music, amongst many other things of our work. Thank you. Please don't forget that we can continue this with your generous support. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel, Facebook, and be a part. We come again to explore yet another window. Our next episode is going to be on Kerala. Meet you again soon. Do join in and be a part of creating a better world in the new world of Goa.